I am 89 years old, and when my daughter Carolyn put a brochure for an assisted living facility on my kitchen table 2 years ago, I picked it up, read every page, set it back down, and said, "Not yet, not never, not over my dead body, not a dramatic refusal born of pride or fear, just not yet." Because I had looked at the actual numbers, my specific situation, my particular house and health and support system and bank account, and the numbers said I had other options that nobody had shown me because nobody had bothered to look. I am a retired county tax assessor. I spent 41 years in Fayetteville, Arkansas, keeping other people's numbers honest. And the one habit that career gave me that has served me better than anything else in the last 5 years is this: I do not make decisions based on what feels true. I make decisions based on what is actually true. And what is actually true about the nursing home conversation is almost always more complicated and more hopeful than the version that gets presented at the kitchen table when a family is frightened. I buried my husband Harold in 2016 after 54 years of marriage and after 4 years of watching emphysema take him the slow way. I buried my son Gary in 2011. He was 52 years old, and his heart gave out on a Tuesday morning in April, and I have never fully made sense of outliving him, and I have stopped trying. I lost Nadine, who was my office colleague for 29 years, and the funniest woman I have ever known in my life. I lost my brother Willard. I have had sufficient loss to understand that the people who put that brochure on your table are not your enemies. They love you, and they are frightened, and they are doing what frightened people do, reaching for the most available solution. My job, as the person whose life was being arranged, was to find a better one. I found one, several actually, and I am going to tell you exactly what I did, in the specific order I did it, with the actual figures attached, because vague advice about staying home has never helped anyone, and I am not in the business of vague. Let me tell you who I am before you decide this does not apply to your situation. I am not a woman with unusual resources. I want to establish that plainly, because the moment someone describes how they managed something difficult, the first response of most people is to find the reason it worked for her and won't work for me. I am not going to give you that reason because the reason doesn't hold up. I grew up in a farmhouse outside of Fayetteville, the third of 4 children, in a family where money was accounted for carefully because there was not enough of it to be careless with. My father kept a ledger on the kitchen table, actual figures written in pencil, updated every Sunday, and I watched him do that from the time I could read and absorb the lesson completely. The numbers are not your enemy. Ignoring the numbers is your enemy. If you know what you actually have, you can work with it. If you are guessing, you are just hoping. I started at the county assessor's office in 1961 when I was 23 years old. I stayed for 41 years because the work suited the way my mind operates, and because I was good at it in a way that felt honest rather than impressive, which is the best kind of good at something. I retired in 2002. Harold retired the same year from the highway department, and we had 14 years of retirement together before the emphysema took over his lungs, and then the rest of him. When Harold died in March of 2016, I was 81 years old and alone in a house that we had lived in together since 1968. A house with 2 floors and a basement and a yard and a furnace and a roof and all the other things that a house has that do not stop needing attention just because the person who attended to them is gone. I managed, not perfectly, but I managed, and I managed on my own terms, and the specific moment that this whole story starts is not the morning Carolyn put the brochure on my table. It is a Thursday afternoon in January of 2022 when I had a minor accident in the grocery store parking lot. Nobody hurt, minimal damage, a moment of inattention. And I drove home and sat in this kitchen and did what I have always done with a difficult problem. I got out a piece of paper and I wrote down the actual figures, not feelings, figures, what I could still do, what I could no longer do reliably, what was getting harder, what the honest numbers said about where I was and where I was headed. That list was the beginning of staying home. Here is the paradox I need you to understand before I tell you what was on the list and what I did about it. The conversation about nursing homes almost always happens at the wrong time, under the wrong conditions, with the wrong information on the table. It happens after a fall, after a health scare, after a moment of crisis that has frightened everyone involved and narrowed the available thinking to whatever solution is most immediately accessible. And the solution most immediately accessible, the one the hospital social worker mentions, the one that comes up in the Google search, the one that has advertising budgets and admissions offices and brochures designed by professionals, is the facility. I'm not saying the facility is wrong. I am saying it is the answer that gets found first. And the first answer is not always the right answer. It is just the first one. The paradox is this. The moment when the nursing home conversation happens is almost always the worst possible moment to think clearly about whether it is actually necessary. Because the crisis has arrived, and in a crisis, what feels necessary is whatever stops the immediate fear. And the fear, the family's fear, the parents' fear, is real and it deserves to be honored. But the fear is not a substitute for the actual numbers. And the actual numbers, in most situations that are not medically extreme, say something more complicated and more hopeful than the fear allows. I had time, some weeks of genuine deliberation after that parking lot accident, to look at my actual numbers before Carolyn brought the brochure. And what I found is what I want to show you, not as inspiration, as accounting. The first thing I did was make the list I described, the honest accounting of what I could and could not do, and then go through it item by item and ask a single question about each one. Is this a nursing home problem, or is this a solvable problem? My list had 9 items. I am going to tell you what they were, because vagueness is the enemy of good decisions, and the reason most people do not find their own solutions is that they think about their situation in general terms rather than specific ones. Item 1, I could no longer drive reliably after dark, and my confidence during the day had been shaken by the parking lot. Item 2, the second floor of the house, where my bedroom had always been, required me to navigate stairs twice a day that had been fine for years and were beginning to feel like a risk. Item 3, Harold had managed the furnace and the water heater and the gutters and the dozen other physical maintenance tasks that a house requires, and I had not fully replaced that capacity. Item 4, I was eating less well than I should because cooking a full meal for one person had come to feel disproportionate to the effort. Item 5. My medication management had gotten complicated after a prescription change, and I had missed doses twice in a month, which I was not going to tell Carolyn, but which I am telling you because honesty is the point. Item 6. I was lonely in specific daily ways that were affecting my sleep and my energy and my general willingness to engage with the world. Items 7, 8, and 9 were variations of the above. Now, I went through that list with the same methodology I would have used at the assessor's office. Is this actually unsolvable? Or does it just look unsolvable because I haven't looked for the solution? Item 1, the driving, was the most emotionally significant and the most practically straightforward. I called the county senior services office, which I had never called in my life because I had never needed to, and I learned that there was a volunteer driver program that would take me to medical appointments and grocery shopping on a scheduled basis at no cost. I also learned that my grocery store had delivery. I surrendered my license in April of 2022. I cried about it for 2 days, which I had not cried about Harold's death and have never fully explained to myself. And then I arranged for the delivery and the volunteer driver, and the problem was solved. Not as I would have chosen. Solved. Item 2, the stairs, was solved in a Saturday morning by my neighbor's son, who installed a second handrail and a motion sensor light on the staircase for less than $200 and the price of a pie. I have not had a problem with those stairs since. Item 3, the house maintenance, required me to do something I had been raised to consider a failure. I made a list of every physical maintenance task the house required, and I called people. I found a handyman through the church bulletin named Ray, who came once a month and handled whatever was on the list. Ray charges me fairly and does good work, and last November fixed a pipe that would have become a crisis if I had been waiting until it became a crisis. I pay Ray what Ray is worth. It is considerably less than 1 month in a facility. Item 4, the cooking, was the one I solved in a way I did not expect to enjoy, and now consider one of the better developments of my recent years. I joined a meal cooperative through the senior center, 6 women who each cook one dish on a rotating Thursday schedule and share among the group. I cook once a week, which is manageable, and I eat well every day of the week, which is not something I was doing before. The cooking is also, I have discovered, one of the primary things keeping me functional and engaged and feeling like a person who still has something to contribute. Losing it would have cost me more than nutrition. Item 5, the medication, was solved by a pill organizer that my grandson set up in 45 minutes on a Sunday afternoon, combined with a phone alarm that I set myself because I am capable of setting a phone alarm and I was not going to pretend otherwise. 2 missed doses in a month became 0 missed doses. The solution was 45 minutes and a Sunday afternoon. Item 6, the loneliness, I am going to spend a moment on because it is the one that is hardest to account for and the most important to address and the one most likely to be treated as too vague or too emotional to put on a practical list. Loneliness is not vague. It has specific measurable effects on physical health that are as well documented as any other risk factor I am aware of, and I spent enough years reviewing county records to know that the number of older people who decline significantly in the years following a spouse's death is not a coincidence. The loneliness is doing something real. It deserves a real solution, not a philosophical acceptance that things are just quieter now. My solution was threefold. I started attending a Thursday morning discussion group at the public library, which I had previously considered beneath me in a way that I now recognize as the kind of pride that costs more than it protects. I started calling people I had been meaning to call for years, specifically 2 women I had worked with at the assessor's office who had retired before I did, and with whom I had maintained the kind of friendship that exists entirely in the intention of maintaining it rather than in actual contact. I called both of them. Both were glad to hear from me. One of them now comes to my house for dinner on the 2nd Tuesday of every month, and I go to hers on the 4th. This arrangement has been in place for 22 months. It has not failed once. And I asked Carolyn directly, not after she brought the brochure, but before, in a conversation I initiated in the fall of 2021. I asked her what she could actually offer in terms of regular, committed presence, not what she thought she should offer, what she could actually sustain. The conversation was uncomfortable. It produced an honest answer, which was that she could reliably come one Sunday afternoon per month and handle whatever needed handling and call on Wednesday evenings. That is what she does. It is not everything I might want. It is real, and it is reliable, and it is the kind of thing you can build a life around in a way that vague good intentions are not. Those 6 solutions, transportation, home modification, maintenance, meals, medication, and genuine human connection, addressed 8 of my 9 items. The 9th item was a joint pain issue that I addressed by actually telling my doctor the full truth about how it was affecting my mobility rather than the partial truth I had been offering for 2 years out of a reluctance to become a patient with a list of complaints. My doctor adjusted my treatment. The joint pain improved by approximately 60% in 3 months. The list had 9 items. Every item had a solution that was not a nursing home. I want to stop and talk to you plainly now, the way I would talk to someone sitting across from me at this kitchen table. I know you are watching this and finding your reasons why your situation is different, more complicated, further along, less manageable than what I have described. Some of you may be right. There are situations where a facility is genuinely the right answer, and I am not naive about that, and I am not asking you to be. But I want to ask you a single question, and I want you to answer it honestly before you use your reasons to exempt yourself from looking. Have you made the list? The actual specific item-by-item list of what is getting harder, with a genuine attempt to identify whether each item is a nursing home problem or a solvable problem? Not a general feeling about how things are going, the list, with the actual items on it and the actual question asked about each one. Most people have not made the list. Most people are operating from the feeling, which is real, but which is not the same as the accounting. And the accounting, the honest, specific, unglamorous accounting, almost always reveals more options than the feeling allowed for. Right now, while you are watching this, someone in your life is facing this conversation. Your parent who is managing worse than they are letting on. Your spouse who has been quietly adjusting their life around limitations they have not named out loud. You yourself, if you are honest about what you have been noticing and not noting down, make the list. Start with the list. The list is where the options live. I'll tell you plainly where I am. I am 87 years old. I am in this house, and I intend to stay here for as long as the honest numbers say it is a reasonable intention. When they say otherwise, I will look at those numbers too. That is the arrangement I have made with myself, and it is the only arrangement I trust because it is based on what is actually true rather than what I prefer to be true or what I fear might be true. I think about Harold sometimes when I'm doing the accounting. He was not a numbers person, that was always mine, but he understood the principle. He used to say, "Mildred, the only thing scarier than knowing what you're dealing with is not knowing. Know what you're dealing with and you can deal with it. Don't know and you're just waiting for it to deal with you." He was right about that, as he was right about most things, and I was not always generous enough in telling him so while he was here to hear it. The people you love who are facing this conversation deserve someone who will sit down with them and help them make the list, not someone who will bring the brochure and wait for them to accept it. Someone who will ask, what specifically is getting harder? And then go through the list item by item and ask, is this actually unsolvable? Or have we just not looked for the solution yet? You might be that person for someone right now. You might be that person for yourself. Either way, the list is waiting. Here is what I want you to do. This week, not eventually. If this is about someone you love, go to them, sit at their table, and ask them to tell you specifically what is getting harder. Write it down. Go through it item by item. Call the county senior services office, which exists in almost every county in this country and which has information about resources that most people never access because most people never call. You will find more options than you currently know exist. If this is about you, get a piece of paper, write the list, the real list, the specific one, the one that requires you to be honest about what has changed in the last year and what you have been managing around rather than addressing. Then go through it item by item and ask Harold's question, is this actually unsolvable? Or have I just not looked for the solution yet? You will find that most of it is solvable, not without help, not without some adjustment, not without the humility of asking for things you were raised to manage on your own, but solvable. And solving it is what keeps you in your house, in your town, in your kitchen, in your life. I have kept records for 41 years. I know what honest accounting looks like. And the honest accounting of most aging situations, examined carefully, says the same thing. There are more options than you've been shown. You just have to be willing to look at the actual numbers.